We're going to bring in CBS News national security correspondent David Martin. So, David, Turkey's president has announced the invasion of northern Syria has begun. What do we know about what's happening so far there and America's role?
Well, we know that we know that Turkey has conducted airstrikes south of the border inside northeastern Syria. That's the sort of the softening up stage before you would send troops across the border. Now, this is airspace that the U.S. controls. And they've controlled it for years as they've conducted this campaign against ISIS. Until recently, the Turks were part of that whole air campaign. They received all the information about flight plans and airstrikes, but now all that has stopped. The U.S. has cut off its relations with Turkey when it comes to informing them of air operations over northeastern Syria. However, it is doing nothing, and it intends to do nothing to stop these Syrian airstrikes as long as they don't threaten U.S. troops that are on the ground. Now, U.S. troops that were in this border area where the strikes are taking place and where the incursion appears about to happen, those troops have all been removed. But if any of these airstrikes come close to U.S. troops on the ground, then U.S. aircraft would intervene. Otherwise, they are not going to do anything. They're not going to shoot down Turkish aircraft. The U.S. position is that this is a fight between two allies, the NATO ally Turkey and our ally against ISIS, which are the Syrian Democratic Forces, and the U.S. is simply not going to get involved in that fight.
So, David, the Kurds have been a fierce fighting force against ISIS. The question that we have now, I guess, is are they able to stand up to the Turks?
Well, and it remains to be seen because for the first thing, we don't know how deep this incursion is going to be, and will it threaten the villages where all of these Syrian Democratic Forces have their families. Obviously, they're going to fight to defend their villages, defend their families, but we don't know if they're going to be threatened to that degree. It all depends on how deep this Turkish incursion is, and we just don't know that yet.
So we mentioned that President Trump opened the door to this. He had spoken to Erdogan. He was aware that Turkey planned to invade and attack the Kurds. From a military standpoint, you know, what is the strategy here? Well,
all the U.S. did here was get its troops out of harm's way. U.S. intelligence concluded over the weekend that the Turks really were going to go. They've been threatening this incursion for months, but U.S. intelligence saw all the signs that this time they were serious. It was both in terms of the preparations that they saw being made and also in terms of the rhetoric. And then, of course, on a Sunday phone call, Turkey's President Erdogan told President Trump that he was going to be coming across very soon. The U.S. military had two choices. It didn't have enough troops up there, even if it wanted to stop the Turkish incursion. So it had two choices. It could leave those troops where they were and just tell them to hunker down, or they could pull them out, get them out of harm's way, and they decided to get them out of harm's way. Those 50 troops weren't going to stop any incursion by the Turks. The question here is, does this now start an unraveling process in which the whole United States operation in northeastern Syria, which has been going on for 5 years and has succeeded in destroying the ISIS caliphate, is this now all going to become unraveled as the Turks go deeper and if the U.S. decides to pull more troops out? There is no order to pull any troops out of Syria right now, but President Trump sure is talking like he intends to get the troops out of there. He tweeted just a short time ago, "We never should have been there in the first place." His body language and his words are all saying, we're going to be getting out of there soon, and it'll be up to Turkey to handle this mess. But right now, all that's happened is those 50-some soldiers have been pulled back from the border so they won't get caught up in this incursion.
So to that point, David, many have expressed concerns about how this could erode the trust America has built up with our allies and with our friends. What are you hearing? Are any of those voices coming from the Pentagon?
Well, this has happened before in Syria. Remember last December, President Trump said he wanted all U.S. troops out of Syria, and he actually gave the Pentagon 3 months to make it happen. And at the time, that was considered a betrayal of our, not just our Kurdish allies who were doing the brunt of the fighting against ISIS, but of all the other countries that were involved in the anti-ISIS campaign, those that were conducting airstrikes in Syria and those that had their own special operations forces on the ground. That order by President Trump was in effect slow-rolled, and where there had once been 2,000 troops in Syria, now there are about 1,000 U.S. troops in Syria. And it's they call it a residual force, and it doesn't look like there were any plans to take it down any further. But now that this incursion has happened, all bets are off. And the president is once again talking like he is going to pull out, and this would be seen as, again, as not just a betrayal of the Kurds, but a betrayal of all the U.S. allies that had forces that were fighting against ISIS in Syria. And of course, the other factor here is that it could undo the entire campaign against ISIS. ISIS had gone to ground, waiting for the conditions to reemerge, and now this Turkish incursion may be producing those conditions, because if the Syrian Democratic Forces decide they have no choice but to fight the Turks to defend their homeland, then that means a lot of pressure comes off ISIS.
All right, David Martin for us at the Pentagon with an update on those Turkish airstrikes underway now in Syria. David, thank you very much.
Sure thing.